Hello, welcome to 8.9 News. I'm Ffinlo Costain. John Gilliland is Professor of Practice in Agriculture and Sustainability at Queens University Belfast and co-founder of the ArcZero project. He works with AHDB and SRUC, and he's a keynote speaker at this year's Dubai Livestock Conference, which takes place in North Wales next week on the 14th and 15th of June. I spoke to John Gilliland and I asked him what key message he'll be taking to Dubai.
For me, the key message is that actually people should not be afraid of this journey. And actually, the very first thing that any farmer wants to do and actually needs to do is actually know their numbers. So how do we help them actually understand what emissions do their farms produce? What carbon stocks are currently in that farm? And once we've got that knowledge, we can then have a more informed conversation about what is the right thing for that farm.
Now, John, the ArcZero project that you set up measures carbon flows instead of just carbon emissions. What's the difference?
The very first thing we did in the ArcZero project was actually define what the end goal was. And actually, this phrase that people use, net zero, it's actually enshrined in UK legislation. So we actually looked up, what does the legislation say? And, you know, what's really interesting is net zero, what it doesn't say is net zero is about zero emissions. That's not what it says. So really what we want to do in ArcZero is deliver what is legislatively asked of us, which is how do we get our emissions down, not to zero, but down? How do we actually do the other side of the coin is build carbon stocks up? How do we take greenhouse gas emissions out of the sky and lock it in trees and hedges and soils? And if we do both of those simultaneously, we will accelerate our journey towards net zero, bring emissions down, stocks up, and lo and behold, that's what we actually deliver. The key thing about it is making sure we go on that journey through a robust and a journey of integrity. So ArcZero really, once we had set the definition that net zero is this issue where you're bringing emissions down, bringing carbon stocks up, you're using some renewables to displace your fossil fuels. You may also some anaerobic digestion in to minimize your waste production. When you look at the totality of that, when that equals zero, then that is net zero.
You mentioned there that net zero is different from zero emissions. And I wonder, from the way that you framed that answer, whether you think there are important aspects of farming and net zero delivery that governments simply fail to understand.
I do. And in every presentation and any talk I give, I go to great lengths at the start to define the end goal. And I also ask, and particularly where I'm speaking to a wider audience than just farmers, is if anyone disagrees, please say it. Because actually in the 3.5 years that we have this defined, and I have been using it, nobody has actually tripped me up and said, John, you are wrong. It does sadden me that there are many outlets of media, there are many policymakers, lobbyists, who believe that net zero is about zero emissions. And that's not correct. And actually, if the only thing people take away from my presence in North Wales, it will be the definition of net zero. And it's up to all of us who are active, representing or participating as farmers or people passionate about our landscape. If we don't articulate it, sure as anything, nobody else is going to articulate. So, for me, I am passionate about articulating the definition of net zero and politely reminding them that where you talk about zero emissions means no animals, but it also means no humans. And that really makes people, oh, I didn't realise that. So that is really the message I'm trying to drive home.
When you're talking to governments and other organisations, do you think that they regard farming in the same way that they think about energy and transport? Or do they seem to expect more from farming in terms of net zero? Are they sometimes guilty of double standards?
Well, I think most people don't understand the complexity of farming and land management, and that it's circular, and particularly biogenic carbon, which is the biological side, not the fossil fuel, the chemistry bit, the biological. Most people don't understand it is cycling. 6 weeks ago, I had the pleasure of giving evidence in the House of Lords around methane. And most people did not realize that actually, biogenic methane belched out of an animal only comes from the grass that photosynthesized the day before, taking carbon out of the sky. And by the way, what comes out the other end of the animal, feces, is absolutely gold dust for the microbes in the soil that will actually lock up carbon and lock it under the soil. So this circularity is complex and most people do not understand it.
When you spoke to the House of Lords committee, do you think that they genuinely took that on board?
I think for quite a few of them, it surprised them. Quite a few of them did not realize the role that ruminant feces plays in the circularity of biogenic carbon. Most people don't realize that actually inside a ruminant, whether it's a cow, whether it's a steer, whether it's a ewe, don't realize that there is a microbiome of particularly fungi. And when those and a healthy microbiomes at a stable pH, when those are defecated, they act as an inoculant for the soil. And actually, one of the biggest issues I actually walk farmers through, and on my own farm too, is for 30, 40 years, we have not been putting enough lime on our soils. Our soils are acidic. And as a consequence, our fungi, our bacteria, our protozoa, are really struggling in the soil. And so when I give quite a few presentations to vets, I'm asking them when they're out treating farmers' animals with acidosis, where the rumen has dropped its pH and the animal's critically ill, and you correct the pH, the animal recovers, is that they also should encourage farmers that they should correct the pH of their soil, because the soil should have as healthy a microbiome as the gut of a cow. And pH is fundamental. And low pHs is the biggest enemy of regenerative agriculture, low carbon agriculture, agriculture.
Just going back for a moment to the Arc Zero project, what were the key discoveries?
So the key discoveries, first of all, every farm is different. There is no silver bullet out there. And that's why I'm very articulate. How do we help you know your own numbers? And it's really important that you get that. Second of all, what we're seeing is there are already some farms out there who are beyond net zero today. And we don't know that because we have not been baselining and measuring. Of the 7 farms in Arc Zero, 2 of them are beyond net zero today. And both of them have ruminants on them. And that came as a shock to a lot of us. The other thing that we found out, which was a revelation, that on 7 farms in Northern Ireland, we stored over 500,000 tons of carbon stocks between our soils and our trees. That came us, we knew we stored carbon, but we'd never seen numbers around it. So that did come as a big shock. And then when we then differentiated what carbon was in the soil and what carbon was in the trees, we found that 96% of the carbon was in the soil and the rest was in trees. Even on my farm, where I have a lot of trees, 80% of my carbon was still in the soil. And it really brings to the fore how important soil, its microbiome, and its soil organic carbon stocks are, and how we need to really understand how to manage them better.
John, what do you say to farmers who perhaps aren't naturally predisposed to baselining?
The success of what we did in Arc Zero was even for the people who were prepared to step up to the plate, okay? The journey we went on was revelationary. The granularity to which we have been measuring is unprecedented. We have used aerial LiDAR technology surveys from airplanes. We're measuring our landscape at 40 scans per square meter. A satellite will do 1 scan per 10 square meters. When you see the LiDAR image of your above ground biomass, such as trees and hedges in 3 dimensions, when you see a runoff risk map of where does surplus water leave your farmland, taking soil, maybe nutrient, maybe pesticide, and discharging the river, the resolution of that is mind-blowing. And so of all the tools we've had in our toolbox, and I'm really passionate of measuring soil organic carbon down to what we call the sea horizon or the bedrock, and not just the top 7.5 centimeters or 30 centimeters. That kind of detail is actually really interesting. And if you can have that done in a non-threatening way and have that provided with training, most farmers, regardless of where they start off, will say, wow. And the second, it's really accurate. And also, it is our plan to try and come back every 5 years and redo it again. Because this journey is not only about a journey of change, it's also about us as farmers measuring the change we achieve. And the baselines for me, and I'm just back from giving a similar presentation in Australia, where my message was exactly the same. To all farmers, do not fret, do not be feared of baselining or granularity, because on the journey we're going, it will be your friend, not your enemy, because it will validate what you are actually doing already. And as you go on your journey of change, positive change for your business, so your business remains profitable, you will actually be able to show the doubters out there the scale of change that you are delivering. So for me, I would absolutely encourage even the doubters out there, when you see this kind of detail about your own farm, not about your neighbor's farm, you will have a oh blimey moment, a wow moment, and a light bulb moment saying, okay, and you're going to come back and do this in 5 years' time. And very quickly, the conversation moves on. So, John, what is it I need to be doing in the next 5 years to make sure when you come back in 5 years' time, there's a positive result? And that, I find, is where then the conversation gets really constructive.
Fantastic. Look, just finally, why the Dubai conference? What's important about this particular gathering?
Well, my strength has always been engaging with farmers, directly with farmers. I mean, yes, I do a lot with policy and I do a lot internationally. I am a farmer. I'm a past president of the Ulster Farmers Union. So I absolutely resonate with where they are. And I believe passionately is this journey is not about talking at our fellow farmers, but talking with our fellow farmers and knowledge. And I am adamant, what I'm helping to do with the Arc Zero is help give knowledge. And knowledge is key in how we go on this journey. Because I can tell you a 2050 without farmers is a 2050 that we're in crisis. Because actually you will still need food production. You will still need land management. Our trick is how we go from being, in the eyes of the public, the pariah, to the eyes of the public being the solution. And I'm in the latter camp.
That was Professor John Gilliland, who will be speaking at Dubai on Friday the 14th of June. More news on our website 8.9.com. That's all for now. We're back soon. Thanks for watching.